friends. This is Kevin Burke of Rachel's Vineyard. Welcome to Oceans of Mercy. So much about the way abortion is covered in our media, the language used by abortion proponents, where they talk about women's health care and reproductive rights. It all serves to distance us and further us from a fundamental truth about abortion. And that truth is that something that those of us who have been involved in ministry to women and men hurting after abortion come to understand. And the truth is this: abortion is a relational wound. Abortion severs a very intimate relationship between a parent and their child in the womb. But the impact of this loss extends out even further. Our guest today is going to help us shed light on one of those groups of people impacted by abortion, and a group that most people don't think about when looking at abortion loss. And I'm speaking about the living brothers and sisters, the aborted child's siblings who have some biological relationship with that child. Given the number of procedures since 1973, when abortion was legalized, there are millions that are intimately touched by this loss. And that includes some of you who are watching this program today. And we're so glad that you're with us on Oceans of Mercy. My guest today is Theresa Bonopartis. Theresa helped develop Entering Canaan, a sacramental journey to an inheritance of mercy. It's a post-abortion ministry published by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, which consists of day retreats, weekends, monthly gatherings, and special retreats. In addition to the women's ministry, she also developed with the great Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. They developed specialized days for men and for siblings of aborted babies and those who aborted as a result of an adverse diagnosis. Theresa's personal journey of healing inspired many works across the country and the world, including an afternoon of prayerful remembrance and intercession, a prayer service she developed with the Family Life Office of New York, which has been televised by EWTN and conducted by many dioceses across the country. Theresa's articles and books on healing can be found in many publications. In June 2002, Theresa was the recipient of the second annual John Cardinal O'Connor Award for her work with those who have experienced abortion loss. Truly a wonderful honor for her. Theresa, welcome to Oceans of Mercy.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. Theresa, can you share with our viewers how you came to see the need for this special outreach to siblings of aborted children, and from what you're learning, how abortion impacts families?
Sure. Well, as you know, Kevin, I'm post-abortive myself. I had an abortion when I was 17 years old. I was coerced by my father and ended up in a really bad relationship with my husband, somebody who was very healthy, but I didn't think I deserved anything better than that. But anyway, I had 2 children with him, and I knew that my behaviors and the things that I was suffering from because of my abortion were impacting my children. I ended up leaving my husband, who was an addict, and raising my kids by myself. So they grew up without a father, and just my struggles of shame and depression and all the different things that come with healing from abortion. And at that time, there was really not much help out there at all. So once I went for healing and got some healing, I really felt called to start speaking out. And I knew that I couldn't do that without telling my kids first. I wasn't going to tell other people about my abortion without them knowing about my abortion. Mm-hmm. And I was terrified to tell them, totally terrified. But when they were teenagers, I ended up telling them and got 2 very different reactions. I have 2 sons. One of them was, "Oh, God forgave you, I forgive you." And the other one was really struggling because they had grown up by that time pro-life, and they just could not believe that I had an abortion, although both of them had the same reaction that many siblings had. Now my life makes sense. And that's kind of what kind of clicks, because there's always a knowledge that something is wrong, or why are things the way that they were. And I obviously had poor relationship with my father, who coerced me to have the abortion. Mm-hmm. And obviously their father was very unhealthy. So once they found out, they really, it just set lights off in their heads. So
I'm sorry, Theresa, how old were your kids when you told them?
They were teenagers.
Okay.
Well, Mike was probably maybe like 12, 13, and Nicholas is like 2 years older than him. So, yeah, so they were a little bit older. it was difficult, and it took a long time and a lot of talking, and actually talking to other people too. And also, I did it. I went for spiritual direction. I wanted to make sure I was doing it for the right reasons. I didn't want to do it to relieve any guilt or whatever I had.
Sure.
I was doing it because I felt called to this work, and I wanted to be able to be there for them so that they could dish out whatever they needed to dish out, and that I would be able to take it.
So you
Because
really went through emotional, spiritual preparation,
yes,
some consultation with people that you trusted.
yes,
This was really something that was, like you said, and I think it's a very important point. This is not something that in a moment of guilt or desperation
no,
or whatever.
yeah,
Uh,
because sometimes you'll hear parents say things like, my kids were really supportive of me, but that isn't really what this is about. This is about getting healing for the siblings themselves, that they need to heal because
that's
it's
a
a
good
loss in
distinction.
their life.
Yes, very good distinction. That your focus was really on, but being responsible as the head of your family. To if you're going to speak out, you have to do this in a way that really attends to your children's needs. And then when you told them, you were really focused on not my feelings, but how do I respond to what they need from me right now? Is that
Right,
correct?
and right, and to be able to give them time for their own personal healing too before I went public. Like, I did do that. I
Um,
mean, it was a long time before I went public because I felt like they deserved to be in a place that, and it was funny because in the beginning when they finally told me they were ready for me to do it, it was like, "Well, you could do it every place else, but don't do it near where we live," you know? 'Cause and it's understandable, right?
sure, sure.
And it took time for it to really get to the point where they were totally comfortable, and then obviously became very much advocates of it all. But even aside from me, I think that during the work in the ministry, I've had siblings come up to me after I've given talks and stuff and say, I know my mother had an abortion. She doesn't know I know. It's really bothering me, or,
How did
different things like that.
in those situations? How do they know? How did they?
Sometimes, yeah, it's very different. Some people could maybe overheard a conversation. There's all different ways that they find out. And the sad part is that they're afraid to say anything to them because they often see that their mom or whoever it is really hurting already, and they don't want to hurt them more. But at the same time, then it keeps them locked in all those feelings and emotions, all those questions that they have that they're really looking for answers for, and they don't feel like they can ask about them. So in many ways, Kevin, it really kind of makes them like the parent, right?
Hmm.
And the parent, like, they're taking care of their parent, but in the same time they're not being helped. And I think that also just women telling me, about their abortions, and being worried about their kids. I think we don't recognize how many people are impacted by this sibling, because if you think about it, and it's terrible to say, but it's true. We know that a lot of people have multiple abortions, right? We already know that.
Sure.
But if you think about it, just to give you like in a scenario, let's just say the mother had an abortion in her youth, and then she got married and the parents aborted their first child or some child along the way. And maybe even the father had an abortion when he was in college or something
Sure.
like that.
Very
So you're
possible.
talking about the children that they have already have three siblings, three that have been aborted. And so it's like multiple siblings for a lot of the people that come forward. And there's so many different dynamics that go along with it that just are really,
Mhm.
painful for the siblings, and just looking for answers. They're looking for answers because here you have the parent that is their protector, people that love them or whatever, and to find out that they have a sibling that parent participated in the death of the child. It's just such a confusing thing to find out, and they're just left with all these different feelings.
Yeah, it's really I mean, it's by its very nature, even if, and God willing, it can have a good outcome, and we'll talk about how that can happen. But I mean, it's going to be destabilizing for a time because
Yes.
your image of these very important people in your life, it takes a hit.
Yeah.
You know,
They have questions like, would my name be the same?
well,
Like if the abortion was, before them, like maybe that baby would have had this name instead of them. So their whole identity was, I wanted what I really wanted. How come I'm here and that baby isn't here? So there's like a
How
guilt.
common is that, Teresa? Because that's a really important point. Is the sense of I'm a survivor in a sense, right? Like I
Right.
survived Roe v. Wade. They might
Yeah.
not articulate it that way, but
Yeah.
emotionally,
I think
how
so.
common is that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they feel guilty for being alive. Like, how come I'm here and my sibling isn't here? And I think it also adds, like, they have to be, maybe they have to be perfect. Or I always give the example of, I've heard like Hillary and Bill Clinton weren't going to have any kids. And then when they decided to run for all these offices, they decided to have one because they thought it would look better if there was a family. And so they had Chelsea. And if she's very, very much in support of abortion
Yeah.
and all these other things. But just thinking about it, think about that pressure that here you were allowed to be born for your parents' political career, and other sibling was terminated. Like the pressure to perform, the pressure that you feel to want to keep being loved. I mean, that's another thing, like in the back of their head sometimes, if I do this, will I not be loved? So there's all these dynamics that go on for them. Another good example is Mark Ruffulo. Do you know him? He's an actor.
Yes.
So he talks all the time about his mom. His mom, I guess, had an abortion before it was legal, and she had a very, very bad experience. And he's very much in support of abortion as well, because he feels like he has to support it because his mother might have died if she didn't, if because
Yeah.
of an illegal abortion. He bought into the lies, obviously. And one of the things I think we do in the pro-life movement that's very detrimental is, like, people, like when he came out with all this, people were attacking him and saying, oh, he doesn't care about his sibling. And, like, I think we miss so many opportunities, because the bottom line here, as you know, Kevin, is that him and his mother are really suffering inside, right?
Yeah.
And his mother's justifying it just like millions of other women do. And so instead of being compassionate and trying to reach them, a lot of times we'll judge, and say, oh, they're pro-abortion and all this other stuff.
I think the way I think about that, and tell me if you agree with this, Teresa, is that denial, whatever form it takes, is protective.
Right.
Until you can provide people with the the atmosphere, the spirit, the love, the possibility that there's something different if they open this up,
Right.
because it would be frightening to turn against that. It's almost like changing religions or something. If you're in a high powered pro-abortion family, perhaps liberal Democrat, and your parents might even share that publicly that they've had an abortion, or might share with you as you become a teenager, look, I believe in the right to choose, and in fact I had an abortion when I was 18, and then you have to then get on board and buy that whole narrative, and that means denying some really strong feelings you might have under the surface. So
Yeah.
it's understandable. But we have to provide. I think you raised a good point. We have to provide that sensitivity, and what are other ways that we can be more sensitive as pro-lifer? Because of course we pro-life folks do really care about both the mother and father and the baby.
Yes.
I've seen that across the board, but sometimes our communication can be better, I think, right?
And I think just to increase the awareness of how many people are really impacted by abortion. I think sometimes we say things and it's not intentional, but maybe we say things, and somebody that's had an abortion is there and hears us, and it really is like a stab to them, even though, like, just the whole aspect of, you can't talk about abortion without talking about the mercy of God and healing. Like, those two things go together. I think to talk about one without the other is crazy at this point. When you think about 63 million abortions, who is not impacted by abortion? It might not be direct, but everyone knows someone who's had an abortion.
Sure.
And so I think we always have to be aware of that. And right, I mean, here we are during Lent, Jesus died on the cross for our sins, even the sin of abortion. And he came to call people to himself and to healing and to be reconciled with him. And I think that's what we have to reflect out there. We need to, just like we do these vigils here in New York at Planned Parenthood, and we have a group in New York City from abortion rights that come, and they're angry. And a matter of fact, the other night they were banging on the door of the church when they had the opening mass for 40
Wow.
Days for Life. But anyway, who are they? They're women that are suffering, that are hurting, that have to justify abortion no matter what. And so, what should we be to them? We shouldn't engage in yelling back and forth with them at all. We should pray for them, pray for their conversion, and be a sign of Christ to them. And I think that's what we need to be all over the place all the time. And it's really hard. It's hard not to react to things.
Oh, it's hard when somebody's screaming in your face. It really is.
Right. Exactly.
Because you're dealing with their form of denial is anger and activism, and that's how they're not dealing with probably wounds of sexual abuse, maybe divorce in their family, combined with
Who
abortion.
knows, right? Even the relationship of the person that had the abortion with, who the heck knows
Sure.
what they
All,
went through?
all that
It's
stuff
really
fuels
crazy.
that.
There's a great little line that Saint Maximilian Kolbe said. It just says, "Don't ever forget to love." And I try to remember that all the time, especially when I'm at the clinics. That no matter what, that's what we're called to do, and to grow in love and to be the face of Christ. And I think that holds true with the siblings too. Like, we always have to be aware. Like, I've had women that have had abortions that tell me things like, well, my kids don't know. I'm never going to tell them. And they don't need to know. It doesn't have anything to do with them. It's not their business. And that's just not true, because obviously we know how abortion impacts us. And just by them being in relationship with us, it's affecting them because it's affecting us. Now, should everybody tell their children? I get that question a lot, and I cannot tell anyone whether they should or not. It's something, I don't know their children. I don't know if they're mature, what the story is with that. I don't know why you want to tell them all of those things. So, like you said before, I think it takes a lot of prayer, a lot of counsel by people that you trust to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And I really think it depends on whatever the child that you're telling, the person that you're telling. I know people who have come to the retreats who, maybe everybody in their family, let's say there's 5 kids in the family, maybe they all know about the abortion, but maybe only one of them came to the retreat. So everybody's in a different place, and
Yeah.
and there's different, there's different reasons. It's got to
Sure.
be everybody's own healing journey with it.
Yes.
But it's
That's
just
a good
such an
point.
important aspect.
Yeah. Yes, that's very good. Um, I, I know the Silent No More Awareness campaign has an article on the website about, like, kind of diving into that issue of, should I tell my children or not? So that, that's one place folks can look. Uh, could you share, Teresa, how you came to develop the retreat for siblings? Let's start with that. Like, how did you come to develop it? Maybe a little bit about how it's structured, and then I have some other questions for you.
Sure. Okay. So obviously, just seeing that need, knowing what my kids had gone through, having the siblings, like I said, come up to me after I gave a talk or something, saying, I know my mom had an abortion, or I know this, or my father told me he had one. And just seeing their pain, and just really recognizing that it really, I felt, was something that was very unique, and that they really needed their own space. And so I spoke to, I work, like you said, very closely with the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal. And I spoke to a couple of them about it. And actually, someone else that works very closely with me in the ministry, he's a sibling and aborted baby himself. And so we just talked about this great need, and we were just like, well, let's just see what happens. So at first we just did a day. And the day was great, but it wasn't enough, because it just wasn't enough to just have a day. So now we turned it into a weekend retreat, and it's really geared specifically to them. The different conferences, we have a witness, we have somebody that's gone through healing that gives witness talks and stuff, and the friars and I give a talk too. And it really is, it's geared on these specific things that they deal with. Like, was I wanted? Would my name be the same? The desperation that they have to understand why it happened. There's such a desperation in there for them. And the loneliness that's born out of the thought that they're isolated in their feelings. So it's really great, because you're getting all siblings together from different parts of the country, Canada. They come from all over the place. And for the first time, their feelings are really being acknowledged, and they're not feeling alone. And so we just try to lead them through those different things to get them to recognize that they aren't alone in these feelings. And it's very sacramental. We have the Blessed Sacrament exposed, and there's different prayer. We have different groups throughout the day. We'll start each conference with maybe a quote from a sibling that's come that pertains to whatever subject we're on. And then after each conference, we have some questions for them to meditate on, so that when we get into group, they're really able, to share with one another how they're feeling. Because the other contrast is, too, you have people that are protective of their parents, when they find out, because they know that, especially if they know that they're still suffering, that their parents haven't really gotten enough healing and they're suffering. But then you also have people who have been really cast aside by their parents because their parents aren't healed and maybe are cold and distant from them. And those parents, it's probably because they don't think they deserve to have a child or whatever, because of, and then you also have parents that'll say, I wish I had aborted you too.
Oh,
There's things like that, terrible things like that.
Yeah.
So there's different dynamics that go on in it. But the one thing that they all are searching for, that I think is our main goal, through the weekend, is just for them to know their dignity and their worth in the eyes of God, and that it doesn't matter, not that it doesn't matter if their sibling was aborted, but it doesn't change the way that God feels about them, and that God brought them into being, and that they themselves have this dignity and worth. And so that's really,
Well, that says a lot about where abortion injures them, in a sense,
right.
has hurt them, in an intimate way, and how that healing touches that and provides us God's grace to bring healing to that. Are they nervous when they first come in?
Yeah, they're really nervous. They're afraid to come. But, one of the things that I try to do when they're signing up is just to let them know, don't worry, you're not going to come here and we're not going to, attack your parents for having an abortion. And that's not what this is about. And, because sometimes I think some of them are afraid they're going to come and everybody's going to be like really judgmental of their parents or something like that. So we just try to just put them in a place where they know that we're there to help them to deal with this. We're certainly not going to judge their parents. We're just talking about the damage that abortion does to everyone. And they're always really, really glad. I was just I have a couple of quotes that I could.
Yeah, please share.
That I could use. I mean,
be great.
I have to get my glasses on. Okay. And just quickly, just like a couple of other things like that maybe they have, like, obviously anger, they could go through shame. Their parents could be overprotective. Like some parents with the kids then are totally overprotective.
That's a really good point. Yeah, they call that helicopter
yeah.
parenting. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And whatever. So anyway, I'll just grab one of them. It was right after my mother's abortion that I began to feel unwanted by my parents, even though I knew they loved me and had always cared for me. I couldn't help but feel that I needed to be worthy of their love, and that I needed to somehow justify having been allowed to be born. Several years after my mother's abortion, and while still an adolescent, I attempted suicide. I took several sleeping pills mixed with alcohol, but they only made me sleepy, and my parents never found out what I had done. The loss of part of my self-esteem because of the abortion experience affected me adversely in many ways throughout a great part of my life. And when you think about it, like these people, like I said, there really hasn't been anywhere for them to go. And I always bring this woman up because it's just so amazing. There was a woman in her late 70s who lived in Florida, and she found out about our retreat. And she found out about it in the last minute, and she actually got in her car and drove like through the night to come to the retreat, because her mother had had multiple abortions, and this poor woman in her 70s had been living with this all her life, So she was just so happy to find out that finally there was some place that you could go for this. And I don't know, I just wanted to mention quickly, we do have a retreat next weekend. From March 11th through 13th at the Shrine of Our Lady of Czestochowa in Pennsylvania. And we don't charge for the sibling retreats. And we also, if somebody needs help, we will also help them with their transportation costs. A lot of these people that come are college age or whatever, and so some of them don't have the funds to be able to get there. So we just want to encourage people to come, and so we do get grants and stuff to be able to allow them to come to the
Okay.
retreat
So
for
if someone's
nothing.
listening to right here who knows someone or maybe themselves would like to attend and they're not in a position to pay, there's
Right,
help available. And even if they need some transportation assistance, there's help there too.
right.
Great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
it's just, yeah. So it's just really trying.
We'll get to before we close, we'll give out the website and stuff. Okay.
This, and I'll just read this other one too. I have
Yeah,
another
please read a
quote
few.
here,
Yeah,
just because I think who says it better than they do, right, Kevin?
absolutely. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So there's another one. It's difficult to put into words the great peace and comfort that I received after I participated in the Healing for Siblings. I met 6 other retreatants who know personally the pain and grief of losing a sibling to abortion, and it made me feel less alone in my loss. As a child, I can remember feeling like someone was missing from my family. During my teen years, I pushed those thoughts away because it seemed not true or possible. 6 years ago, when I learned my mom had an abortion 4 years before I was born, suddenly everything that didn't make sense came into focus. And, like you'll hear that over and over and over and over again. Like it's really kind of amazing when you think about it, that that's just a common thread with all of them when they find out. I always knew somebody was missing. My life makes sense now. And when you think about it, like the whole trauma of it, um, and not knowing why things are the way that they are. You know what I mean? Like going back to my kids. So I had a terrible relationship with my father because he had coerced me into an abortion. Even though in time we were reconciled, there was always like something there, even though you tried not to have it be there. And aside from him, I married somebody who was unhealthy because I didn't think I deserved anything better, and ended up leaving with him. And then he wasn't even a part of my kids' life. So look at this is a result of abortion, and my kids were living with this fact of a poor relationship with my father, not having a father in their lives because of abortion. And but not knowing that that's why it was. So it's got to be so hard for all these kids not to know what the problem is. Just like when we talk about like with couples where there's a lack of intimacy and maybe the husband doesn't know the woman had an abortion, right? And
Right.
so it's the same type of thing, like there's those dynamics are going on, but you almost feel crazy and alone because you can't understand why this stuff is happening.
Sure.
And so when they find out, it's like, oh my gosh, this is why things are like that. So it's as painful as it might be, and at the same time, it's a relief for them to find out those things, to find out about it.
How do they once as when they go through the healing program, and it comes to be Sunday and the days after that, how do they then what's the relationship with that sibling or siblings that were aborted after that process is? Do you think there's a different kind of relationship they
Yeah,
have?
definitely, for sure. And I wonder if I have that here. I mean, I have somebody that wrote it so beautifully.
Oh,
Um,
that'd be
they
great.
really do end up like, well, part of the process of the retreat, obviously, is to try to get them to come to terms with their aborted siblings. And we have a little ceremony that we do and
Sure.
whatever. And yeah, like you'll hear over and over again, like they're almost like a friendship develops. Like they feel like they don't feel separated from the sibling. They feel joined to the sibling, and that almost like it's just a friend of theirs then. And they talk about that very much. I don't know if I have that one with me. I'm looking.
That's very beautiful.
Let me just see. Sorry.
No, that's okay. What you're sharing is so important, and I'm sure that many of our viewers never really thought about that aspect of it. I mean, I know for myself, it took some time to get to introduce the whole idea of men and how they're hurt, but a few people think of the siblings. So I think it's wonderful that you're raising that awareness.
It's so important. I actually don't. It doesn't seem like I do have it with
Okay,
me.
well, that's all right.
But
You have on your website, there
Yeah,
are,
there's different testimonies on the website and different things that people could read if they want to. And I think that, like what you're saying as far as like not really thinking about it, I don't think it's not uncommon. I remember, when Cardinal O'Connor was alive, at one point I sent him something. He had gone to the clinics and he was praying, and it really impressed my sons that he was out there doing that. And I wrote him a note. I used to work for the Archdiocese in New York, and I wrote him a note, and he wrote me back, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, this was many years ago, obviously. I never thought about the siblings. It makes so much sense. I never thought about the siblings." So I think that's something that people just are not aware of to any great degree. And it is tricky, like I said, because you do need to be careful. Why are you telling them? How are you telling them? What are you prepared to get thrown at you once you do tell them? If they're angry, if they're upset, are you able to allow them to ask them the questions that they need in order to heal? Can you take whatever they're going to dish out on you? And if you can't, then you shouldn't tell them yet,
yeah.
because they have a right to be angry.
Hmm.
They have a right to feel what they're feeling. And I think as a parent, it's our responsibility to allow them to express what they're feeling. They shouldn't be taking care of us. We're parents, we should be taking care of them.
Yeah,
And that's
and sometimes that requires folks to do some self-care prior to that.
yes.
They might need to do some healing, some counseling, spiritual direction. So you're in that place where you can receive that and really be, that the Christ-like to them as a parent, and give them what they need at that time. That's a very good point. Teresa, in our last few minutes together, could you share with how folks can get in touch with you, and also how they can sign up for the upcoming retreat, either this retreat or future retreat, because you have them regularly.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I have two websites because, as you know, I work for Lumina. I'm the director of Lumina, which is a healing program of good counsel homes. And I'm also, like you said, the co-developer of the Entering Canaan ministry. So either one of them has sibling information on it. So the Entering Canaan site is enteringcanaan.com, and there's a whole sibling section. They could call me at 877-586-4621, or email enteringcanaan17@gmail.com. And the other site is Lumina. If they looked up Lumina post-abortion, all that information would come up too. So either one of those would be good. And again, there's no cost for the retreat. We really try to encourage people to come because also, as you know, Kevin, like this is generational as well. So it's so important to get these people to a healing place so that it just doesn't keep on moving through, right?
Yes.
And we're just really happy to do it. It's a hard weekend, but it's a really beautiful weekend.
Excellent. Teresa, thank you so much for being on Oceans of Mercy today. This is such an important work you're doing that the Lord has entrusted to you. I'm so pleased you were being able to share with folks about the sibling ministry and your other good works. And we're going to continue to promote this and call people to healing. Thank you for what you're doing for those who are hurting after abortion.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me on.
God bless you, Teresa.
Okay.
Well, dear friends, listen. We need to share this information far and wide. So you've been touched by this today. If you feel like you need to attend this retreat or refer someone, make sure you go to Lumina's website and get more information. But also share the link that will be available on this program. Share it on your social media, in your email, with anyone you think would benefit from this healing message. Thanks for being with us today on Oceans of Mercy.